Live on Building in Public today, and we're featuring Enrique Esclusa from Assemble. Welcome, Enrique.
Thank you, and perfect pronunciation. That was very good.
Oh, thank you. Do people trip it up a bit?
Oh yeah, I've heard Enrique. I've heard Enrique. Sometimes they misspell it when they hear it, but generally Enrique is the way that I go by. And then of course, if people speak Spanish, Enrique would be the way to say it. But
Enrique.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And are you in Miami right now? We read on your bio that you're a big Miami fan.
I am. I actually relocated about 2 weeks ago. So to give you a little bit of my background, I was born in Venezuela, but I moved to Miami when I was 11. I was here until I was 18. And then I moved to New York and San Francisco for the last 13 years. But with the rise of distributor work and starting Assemble, decided, well, maybe it's time to go back to Miami and at least test out if we can build Assemble from here. So
that's cool. One of the rare people who had roots in Miami and then came from SF back, I guess. That's cool.
That's right. Although I got to say, it's like a very different city. Right now I'm in Brickell, which is a walkable city now. But when I grew up here, it was, financial district, 5 p.m. and afterwards just completely dead. So it's been fun to come back and see how different it is.
Yeah, wow.
When you were in San Francisco, did you run into any of the this Venezuelan entrepreneur mafia that's here? Do you know these guys?
I do not. I know a couple, but I wonder if they're part of the mafia.
Jonathan Geller, do you know Jonathan?
Jonathan, I do know Jonathan, actually.
Yeah, so he's a good friend of ours. He was on the show before, and we talk to him all the time.
Oh, very cool.
Maybe Ariel Poler?
I don't.
Okay, he's a little bit of a kind of maybe the earlier class of Venezuelan expats.
Gotcha. Okay, do not know him, unfortunately, but I'd be excited to meet him.
Cool.
Yeah, that's cool. I had no idea that existed.
Yeah.
Have you been involved in all the Miami tech stuff going on since you came back? What's that been like?
I've definitely met with a couple of people, but certainly not involved with all of the events. So when I got here, it was, I guess, Crypto Week, which is not something that I necessarily participated in. There was a lot of events during that week, and then I've met, of course, some people while I'm here. Although Miami's a very spread out city. Have you guys ever been?
I haven't actually.
I've just been briefly, maybe 15 years ago, but not. I haven't spent a lot of time.
Yeah, so Miami's maybe kind of like LA or Houston, which is like a greater metro area, but not everything is right next to each other. So, for example, you might be in Miami Beach, I might be in Brickell, and it's not that very far, on a map, say, but it actually could take you 40 minutes to get there with traffic. And so there are very different worlds that are coexisting at the same time in Miami.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And do you feel like with the kind of the newly resurgent tech scene there, is that kind of part of what you're thinking about in being there? Like with maybe there's access to talent, access to capital, just more, I think, we haven't talked about your business yet, but it looks like your business works with and sells to maybe startups or tech companies. So.
Yeah, good question. Kind of a two-parter there. So I think part of it is, or at least my personal reasons for coming, largely family. So a lot of my family is here. I put a very high price on family, and it's proven to be very difficult to convince them to move to San Francisco versus me coming here. The other part is I do see a big rise in folks considering Miami as a real place to live in, and one where you can, in fact, actually have a tech career, which was certainly not the case, call it, 10, 12 years ago. Certainly not when I was, graduating from college. And so there's kind of an interesting opportunity. But the other side of it is, with the rise of distributor work, you could have employees in different locations. So right now at Assemble, we have employees in New York, Seattle, Denver, and San Francisco, now in Miami. And we've learned how to adapt and how to work well and collaborate as a team while in different time zones and locations. So I can see a lot of people who had never considered Miami an option deciding, hey, I can work for a New York-based company in Miami and kind of have the best flow of the worlds. So we'll see if that proves to be true. It's at least a 365-day experiment, and if the business requires me to move back, I'll be prepared to do so.
Yeah.
And with regards to your second part, so Assemble and what we do, to give you a little bit of context there. So Assemble is a compensation platform for forward-thinking organizations. And effectively, what we do is we help companies make better compensation decisions. And part of the reason or the inspiration for this is me and my co-founder worked at a company called Expanse. It was a startup that grew from, while I was there, from 25 employees to over 150 employees across multiple locations through multiple fundraisers. And we didn't have anybody who owned compensation at the time. So it kind of fell in my lap, even though my background was more in finance. And what I learned was this is something that every company goes through, deciding what to pay employees and how do you manage those changes over time and across different locations and compensation types. But this is all done in spreadsheets with really bad data. And now with the rise of distributed work, the markets are changing much, 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 much faster. And there is no market data for all of the possible positions and locations you're hiring for. So how do you make these decisions with insufficient or incorrect data? And how do you manage all of these locations and do things that even they themselves didn't think they were capable of doing? It can just be very difficult to do that for all parties involved, but all great things in life are difficult and worth doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure like more and more of this will come up as you grow in the coming months.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a lot of challenges for sure. I even just reflecting back on like my experience, like my first job in college, I worked at an investment bank called Barclays in New York. And there were some people that I loved working with, and it was a really, really hard job. And I don't think that, some traditional industries invest much in what people management can and should be. So I remember people telling me like, this job is hard, but like I did it, now it's your turn to do it. And I think that maybe more progressive managers would say, I know how hard this is, and I'm going to try to make it easier or better on you, right? Mm-hmm. Then I go on to private equity at a fund called TPG in San Francisco, which is a step in the right direction, I think, in terms of adopting a West Coast mentality, at least, or something closer to tech. And people invested a lot more in me than I had seen in the past. And not a knock on necessarily investment banking, just the reality of my experience. And then when I got to Expanse, the startup, for the first time I had people giving me very critical feedback on an ongoing basis that was written and clear. And I remember a boss of mine who gave me very critical feedback that was both on the positive side and then on the constructive side, saying things, these are examples of things that you've done that have been remarkable and we're really proud of you for. These are areas where you really need to grow, right, for you to get to this next step in your journey. And I was always humbled by that, right, and that people would be willing to put in the effort because not only but the clarity of the feedback requires a lot of time. Writing in general and thinking through things and being able to communicate those aspects take a lot of time. And so I always appreciate it when people put in the effort and want to try to do the same myself.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm also curious, like when you were thinking back on that career arc, like did you know that tech was an interest from the beginning, or did that sort of come after you moved to the West Coast and were doing more private equity stuff? Because when we talked to Shensi actually from Merge,
I would have really figured that out, and it can be really frustrating. So I hear you.
Yeah, right. Thanks for bearing with us on that.
Yeah, thanks for your patience. We appreciate it. So kind of, I know we're sort of getting to the final wrap, but, at this point, sometimes we like to diverge a little bit from the specifics of, your business and career, kind of just understand a little bit more about you and what, some of your other kind of interests, hobbies, curiosities, et cetera. So, happy to sort of hear any of that. If any of that strikes, you mentioned kind of music as a hobby. I wonder if that's something that you're still pursuing much, or if that's something that you think about in different ways these days.
Yeah, so I definitely don't play guitar anymore, which is kind of a shame. I think like 16-year-old me would be very disappointed. He would say, "What happened to me, man?" One of those. But one of the things that I've been really, really excited about is I recently bought a record player, a vinyl record player. And when I was 18, maybe 19 years old, I went to NYU, and I was walking the streets of New York, walked into a record store, and I was like, this is so cool. I always wanted a record player, never had one. And so I told myself, okay, I'm going to buy a record player the day I start a company. And I didn't really break my promise until I finally started Assemble. And so late last year, I decided this is the time I'm going to buy a record player. And I got to say, one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, and it's going to sound silly, but it's true, was what's going to be my first record that I actually play? Because
Yeah.
you can buy a bunch, right? But you can only play your first once. And so
Yeah.
ultimately, I decided to play Jimi Hendrix because he was one of the reasons why I decided to start playing guitar. But that's something I've always been really passionate about is music. I think it's just like it's one of those universal things, right? I may not even speak the language, but throw me into a room with people and good music, and like we're gonna find a way to have a good time, and we're gonna have a way to kind of communicate with each other, whether it's through dance or just enjoying the music itself. So I've always been very, very passionate about that.
That's epic. What was the album or song? Do you remember?
I do remember the song. It was Purple Haze, which is one of the first songs I ever learned how to play, which is a hard song to play, but I just think that. Sorry, DK, you cut out a little bit. Is that what?
I think he's a little delayed.
I think so too. We can speculate what the question was if you want, Mishti. Maybe
Something
you can
about Purple Haze. Something about you learning how to play Purple Haze.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's still one of my favorite songs. I think it's just like aggressive in its own way, and from a guitar perspective,
was that one of the first ones? First albums that
the first, but then I can't hear the rest of the question. What do you think he said, Mishti?
Oh, sorry. Is that one of the first albums that you owned back?
Super inspired by what you guys are doing, and really happy that we can help you get your message out a little bit. And thanks for letting us get to know you a little bit too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. This was really fun. Love to do it again.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Well,
awesome.
Take care now and have a good weekend.
Thanks, you too. Have fun. And bye, DK.
Yeah.